On today's edition of the show, the Florida Panthers will be taking on the Toronto Maple Leafs on the road in Game 5. We'll be discussing who are the players traveling with the team as far as the aces. We're going to talk about what the players have said in between games. We're also going to discuss the trends that happened through the 6-game winning streak and if they're sustainable or not. And we'll be discussing why you need to treat tonight's game like your Game 7.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, May 12th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're to your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And special shout out to our everydayers who come here to listen to Locked On Panthers and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So, Cats fans, we have another game to discuss tonight, and for us all to watch. It'll be a 7 p.m. puck drop on TNT in the U.S. for the U.S. listeners, and a great opportunity for the Panthers to end the series and get a move onto the conference final, their first one since 1996, and usually on Fridays, it's a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show, but due to our schedules not matching, unfortunately, Nick and I were not able to record together today on today's edition of the show. But we do have a special guest, regardless, on today's edition of the show. He is from the FLA Cat Nip Podcast, Kevin Rodengen. Kevin, welcome to your debut on Locked On Panthers.
Thank you so much, Armando. It's so good to be here. So good to be a Florida Panther fan right now. It is the good life for us over here, and it's well-deserved finally.
Before we go into the show, tell the listeners where you are podcasting from currently.
Yeah, currently I'm in Rome, Italy. My wife is Italian, so we're over here right now. We both got some jobs over here, and it's taken us away from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where I grew up for a bit. Our plan is to call Fort Lauderdale home someday again, but for now we've got to do this, and so it's definitely challenging to be watching games at 1:30 start times a.m. for us over here in Italy, but I do it anyway because I'm crazy. And so it's always been fun to keep up with it, even though, it starts so late.
Yeah, and props to you for your dedication on watching this team, and of course being a South Florida native and starting your own show as well, discussing the state of the Florida Panthers. So let's get right into it. The Florida Panthers obviously traveled yesterday from South Florida to Toronto for their Game 5 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. According to Andy Slater, the plane that took the Miami Heat from New York City to South Florida, once the Heat got out of their plane, the Florida Panthers boarded that same plane to go from South Florida to Toronto. So maybe a little bit of good juju there
Good
for
juju. Yeah.
for the Florida Panthers as they are traveling and hoping to clinch their series against Toronto. But a few as far as the aces who are traveling for the Panthers going up there, Matt Gusta using that third goalie in case of an emergency, Lucas Carlson, who has been up and down with the Florida Panthers, of course, with the Checkers season being over. You have your aces on the roster, and then Ryan Lomberg skating, no timetable for return. So I'm not anticipating him returning anytime in this series. But about the mindset, about what the players are saying and how their calm demeanor. Paul Maurice talking about how they judge ourselves based on how they play and how hard they play, and also Sasha Barkov talking about how Paul Maurice has been in every situation and knows how to handle it, and a guy that they trust and believe him, and the players do like playing for. So of course, these come with different challenges. And fun stat, Kevin, for the first time in 36 years, there has not been a sweep in the first 2 rounds of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So
Wow. Yep.
little bit of a different territory that the whole league finds themselves in. And listen, I said the other day that the sleeping giant was awake for the Maple Leafs, but the Panthers getting that opportunity to just win one game, and the fact that the Panthers are following their leader and their coach, and of course Barkov setting the example as well as the captain as well. I think that the Panthers really have a good mindset going into the rest of this series.
Yeah. Well, that's a testament, this no sweeps in the first 2 rounds, to how competitive the league is now, and how all these teams, an 8 seed doesn't seem like an 8 seed anymore. And thank goodness for us, because, we're a powerhouse, and we obviously, a lot of people saying we don't really look like an 8 seed. So, yeah, but I'm super impressed with the way the Panthers are playing. This is a team I can be proud of, even if, this is as far as we got. It's something I think everyone says we're playing with house money this year. I think come, New Year's, nobody even expected us to make the playoffs. And that was a big bummer for fans like us, because, we saw us win the President's Trophy last year. But now all of this is finally being cashed in, like we get swept by the Tampa Bay Lightning last year. And that was devastating, especially after such a good season. But I think every single one of those guys learned something big from that series. And that was, you can't take your foot off the gas. You have to keep going. So what? You win one round. And I think the Maple Leafs are discovering that this year. They said, oh my gosh, we won a round, and they're celebrating like they won the cup. You got to keep your foot on the gas. This thing has a lot more hockey to play, and hopefully the Panthers will keep having a lot more hockey to play.
Yeah, and you think about where, and not only just the Maple Leafs, but another team that just got eliminated last night in the New Jersey Devils, as far as getting those demons out of the way. And when I'm not saying that the Maple Leafs celebrated too hard, that's not what I'm saying. Same thing with the Devils, but getting that monkey off your back, and then mentally having to shift to the other series once you get that monkey off their back. And you're kind of seeing that reminiscent to what the Panthers did last year. Of course, 26 years in the making for the Florida Panthers to get where they are. But now that they had that under their belt, I feel like it gives them a little bit of a leg up over Toronto, that it's like a act like you've been there before. And I think the Panthers are, I think that going through that heartbreak of last year sets them up for hopefully clinching and getting one more win in this series.
Yeah, and no teams that have ever, to me, won the Stanley Cup didn't go through these, big battle and get these big bruises from trying to go deep in the playoffs and maybe not making it. And some teams are regular playoff teams, like we saw San Jose over the last decade as a regular playoff team. They make the cup final once and they can't do it. And so, sometimes it takes all those growing pains to make it far. And then you see guys like Bill Zito trade, one of our best players in Huberdeau, because he doesn't believe, Huberdeau is the kind of guy who's going to take us to a Stanley Cup. And he believes Tkachuk is. And I think that kind of mentality is really paying off for the Panthers now. So really happy that no matter what, I see us moving forward, even after such a tough season, you could say.
Yeah, and just the attitude factor for the Panthers overall, the vibe, the aura that he brings, it definitely gives the Panthers definitely a different dimension, as something that I've preached about all year, and something, of course, you've probably preached about on your show as well. So we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to talk about the trends that the Florida Panthers have had from Game 5 against the Boston Bruins all the way to now, and reason for optimism that we could see the Florida Panthers get back to that style of play. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about eBay Motors. And for a championship team, it's all about making sure that every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right. First time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win with the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. That's right. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Segment number 2 here on this Friday, May 12th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. I got Kevin Rodengen from the FLA Cat Nip Podcast here on the show to discuss the Florida Panthers Game 5 against the Toronto Maple Leafs tonight at 7 p.m. on TNT. So, Kevin, looking at the trends for the Panthers from Game 5 all the way to now, and then what the Florida Panthers have done since Game 1. Of course, even before the series started, I said the Florida Panthers, they can't afford to go 59% on the penalty kill. In this series, 77.8%. Not the best numbers as far as that, but 7 of 9 on the PK for the Panthers. Their power play coming alive. From Game 5 to now, they're 37%, while in this series 28. Their goal differential since they're averaging averaging a goal more than their opponent in the last 7 games over their opposition. And the transition that they've had from one series to the next of low scoring games and being able to win those low scoring games despite what happened in Game 4, which crazy to think that how close that game was regardless of everything. They're also still doing this while winning 40% of their faceoffs too. Just goes to show that stat isn't the end all be all. And here's also the thing that the Florida Panthers are doing well. From Game 5 of the Boston series to now, averaging shots against were 34, but in this series, that is down by 4 shots from Game 1 to now. So it just goes to show what the Florida Panthers are doing as far as eliminating what the Maple Leafs are doing. And even with how close Game 4 is, I have so much reason for optimism that even though we could see maybe a lineup change, maybe 11F7D as far as the fourth line with maybe taking out Dalpe because they are a -3 on the ice in this series. But the fact that they're able to eliminate the Maple Leafs to 4 less shots than what they did averaging from Game 5 to now, I mean, got to be encouraged with how the Panthers' style of play has really overwhelmed their opposition.
Yeah, I'm extremely encouraged by the Panthers, even after losing that last game. It would have been great to sweep the Leafs because that would have just imploded the Toronto fan base, and we could have been excited about that. But no, I'm not worried. I do think these have all been very close games. Every game so far, the Toronto Maple Leafs have only scored 2 goals, and that's a huge testament to Sergei Bobrovsky playing. He is on fire right now. It's the goalie we've been waiting for a long time, which how much money we're paying him. Mm-hmm. And so he's finally showing up big time for the Florida Panthers. And so I'm very optimistic about us playing, even if it takes, let's say 3 more games, worst case scenario for the Panthers to win one. I think they're all close enough where I believe we can take one. No doubt, every game is a new painting, let's say, and a new story. And so I hope we can take it as soon as possible for the sake of getting some rest a little bit before we have to take on an Eastern Conference Eastern Conference final team. And yeah, it's definitely like you mentioned, all these stats are important, but when it comes to the playoffs, almost every game, everything gets thrown out the window. It's a new game. It's a new experience. So I have all the confidence in the world, though, that this team isn't going to let them come back as much as they were in this last game. I think we're going to learn more and more how to shut down Toronto. They had more chances last game than normal. But if we can stick to how we won game 3, for example, where we kind of outmuscled Toronto on every front, I think we can win game 5.
Yeah, and game 3 for the Maple Leafs, it felt like the Maple Leafs were dead on the inside based on how they were moving up the ice, and with Sergei Bobrovsky as well, 934 save percentage, 1.99 GAA, on how he's performing in these first 4 games. And the crazy thing is the Panthers won the Corsi 4 battle, and quickly after game 4, Paul Maurice was quick to acknowledge that the difference in this game was the block shots, 21-9. He knows that the Toronto Maple Leafs were out forechecking the Panthers in that game. And then what did the Panthers do? The alarms go off for them. Not panic, but alarms go off. And it's like, okay, go continue doing what you were doing well. I mean, Corsi 4 percentage, 5-on-5 in this series, 200 to 183. They're equal in the special teams category, not as far as percentages, but goals for the Panthers and goals for the Leafs, 2 each. And this was the second best power play unit in the whole league, right behind Edmonton in the Toronto Maple Leafs. And even strength play, 8 goals for the Panthers, 6 for the Maple Leafs. So that the Panthers are doing this mostly at even strength play. And we saw this last year with the series against the Washington Capitals. The Panthers were dominating the 5-on-5 play. If I remember correctly, they gave up 6 power play goals to the Capitals last year in round 1, which didn't matter for the Panthers. But still, the fact that they are the goal differential on special teams is right at 0 as well. It's such a big win for this Panthers team. And so it gives me more optimism that the Panthers, they know deep down inside in that locker room they can compete with these guys.
Yeah, and it might be a hot take, but I think the Panthers are the best team in the league 5-on-5 right now. I really do. And if we can stay out of the penalty box and draw some more penalties, I think we're going to keep climbing the way we are. Because you saw in game 3, we didn't take any penalties. That was was that the first time all year we did that?
It feels that way.
Yeah, we're the most penalized team in the league throughout the season. I think that was a stat I heard. So it was good to see us being more disciplined. You could argue we deserve to be penalized a few times in that game, but we got away with it. And so, I really do think if we can stay out of the box, we got this thing wrapped up.
Yeah, and it all comes down to, it's funny, Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick were talking about on 32 Thoughts, is it's the Toronto Maple Leafs weren't generating enough speed to have the Panthers get their sticks in the way, and for them to have certain stick infractions, board battles that would have a player stick hitting someone's face in game 3 as well. It's kind of like in basketball where a team that is shooting a lot of outside shots like 3-pointers, because they're not driving into the paint often, you're not going to draw as many fouls in that instance. And it's kind of the same thing when the Maple Leafs were not driving towards the slot. You're not gonna draw as many penalties when you're going up the gut for Toronto. Of course, they got 2 power plays in game 4, converted on one of them. Obviously with the weird bounce off the referee's knee. That is still a legal play for those wanting to, before you guys look up in the rule book. But hey, the Panthers, they really are protecting the middle, and the Leafs. Listen, I saw a lot of people saying that Joseph Wall was incredible, but honestly, the Panthers, I really don't feel that they made him work.
True. Yep. No, I don't think we tested him enough. I think the Leafs played really well in front of him. They wanted to give themselves a chance to win. And so sometimes a team can rally, to help a goaltender. And I think you saw us do that with Alex Lyon for a while.
Yes, absolutely.
Giving a new goalie a really good start. And so I think it's up to the Panthers to really pepper this guy now going into the game tonight.
Yeah, no doubt. And speaking of game 5 tonight for the Panthers, it is an opportunity to close the series and get some much needed rest right before right before knowing what's on the other side. But of course, you got to take care of this series first for the Florida Panthers. And we are going to discuss this next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Friday, May 12th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. I got Kevin Rodengen from the FLA Cat Nip Podcast here on the show. And listen, if the stress level for the fan base wasn't really too high after losing Game 4. I know mine wasn't, but of course, as a fan and you yourself, and of course as a content creator, sometimes you got to tell your own self that things are going to be okay as well, and as far as putting out that message to the world as well. And listen, when it comes to playing with fire with this Panthers team, of course it's not a game that they want to play, because of course Toronto pretty good on the road in this postseason. Of course, they had to squeak out some overtime wins in Tampa even prior to this series against the Panthers, which a lot of people can argue that Tampa looked like the better team and Toronto was just able to convert on their opportunities. But Kevin, the Panthers, they need to treat tonight like it's Game 7. Like, leave zero doubt for the Maple Leafs, and much need the rest that we teased prior to this segment, because we already know what's on the other side. Carolina beating New Jersey in 5 games, which just of course the Devils, like I said, very similar to the Panthers, very fast team. Questions in goal. A youth movement that's going on in New Jersey there, but then you have the Carolina Hurricanes, who are very veteran savvy. Of course, they're missing Teuvo Teravainen, Andrei Svechnikov, Max Pacioretty there, and that veteran team right now is getting a lot of rest. I believe the earliest the Eastern Conference Final could start is Tuesday, and if you can limit your rest versus your other opponent on the other side by just only one less day, super beneficial for the Florida Panthers if they are able to clinch tonight. And the players know, they're not ignorant to it. They watch hockey just as much as we do on their off time, so they know what's ahead if they are able to finish this off. But once again, they need to treat tonight like it's Game 7. Your thoughts, sir?
No, absolutely. Rest is critical in the playoffs. You have so many guys who don't announce that they're injured and are playing through injury, and that gives them a couple of days to put some ice on it and hope that they can heal up a little bit before our next round. The Carolina Hurricanes are a big dog. And of course, we've been playing some of the best teams in the league here to get here, against the Bruins and against the Leafs now. And so, but Carolina is just as intimidating as those guys. And so I really hope we can get this done. As you mentioned, treat it like a Game 7. I've already witnessed one playoff miracle this season, and that would be our miracle that got us past the Bruins. And so I don't need to witness another one. I don't want this thing to go closer towards Game 7. And of course, as we saw, the Bruins, holding onto their sticks a little tighter every game along the way as we creeped into their Game 7 and we took them in overtime. And so we don't want that anymore. And we know it's possible. And so we got to get it done as soon as possible. I know we will get it done. I'm saying that with confidence, but we don't want it to extend very far. So hopefully the Panthers can do that tonight. But if not, they do have another chance at home.
And you think about also we spoke about the Panthers, comparing them to the Maple Leafs earlier on how they went through their growing pains and losing a previous year in 2021 and then having the ability to come back in this position. The Carolina Hurricanes are in that same, a little bit of that same predicament, not as much because they've won multiple rounds in multiple years. I mean, going to the conference final in 2019, of course, getting back in of course, taking a step back, losing into the first round in 2020 against Boston, going back to the second round in that COVID year, which the Florida Panthers did face Carolina 8 times. And unfortunately, their 2 wins in those 8 games, both of them came in overtime. So Carolina was just dominant against the Panthers in that 2021, excuse me, COVID season when it was the Central Division and they were in the pods. By the way, if they're able to advance, long live the Southeast Division, by the way, going back.
Totally. I've been thinking about that over the last few years anyway, too. Washington
So,
winning a cup, Tampa Bay winning multiple cups, Carolina being dominant, the Florida Panthers creeping in. The old Southeast Division, definitely, rising. They used to be terrible. So it's nice to see everybody up on top.
and let's not forget the Atlanta Thrashers, by the
That's
way,
right.
too,
Yeah.
in that, and also I guess the Winnipeg Jets for 1 year, as
Yeah.
well as that was just a strange year with having Winnipeg in the division. But yeah, you only once in that span have the Carolina Hurricanes not made it to the second round neither as well. So you what's on the other side, and knowing that it's going to be such a big challenge for them regardless. And of course, we don't want to put our cart before the horse too. They have to have like the tunnel vision right here and say the Leafs, the Leafs, the Leafs, the Leafs, the Leafs. This is still a team with so much talent. John Tavares has no points in 4 games against the Panthers. We know what John Tavares has done in the past against the Panthers going back to 2016. Marner and Nylander, they finally got their demons out of the way from the first 3 games, scoring in game 4. You do not want to give them another opportunity where they have even a chance to take over this game. You want if there are guys to beat you, you still want to have the Sam Laffertys and the David Camps of the world beat you, and you could live with that.
Yep. And I think you're going to really see Matthew Tkachuk step up today. I know he's been a little quiet throughout the series. Physically, he's been very loud.
Yes.
But on the score sheet, he hasn't quite put in as many as he had in the first series. I think he's the kind of guy who rises to these occasions. He will be treating this like a Game 7, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and so great after guaranteeing being back in Boston after Game 5. And if there's anyone who's his own worst critic, it's him. And it's crazy to think he still leads the team in points in this series, but just no goals in that one. And of course, there was a lot of criticism of Matthew Tkachuk about how he performed in the Battle of Alberta last year against the Edmonton Oilers. But listen, he knows that there's a little bit of that talk out there about how he is as a playoff performer, but still. He's still bringing the physicality. He's still getting in your face. Even at the end of Game 4, where he punched Mitch Marner twice, and then that laugh that Marner had. Former teammates, by the way, in the OHL when in their trip to the Memorial Cup. No love lost between those two guys, and of course him and Austin Matthews in the same draft as well. So you know that you want to kind of stick it to them. And how much better would it be to finish it off in their own barn? And I don't even want to know what Toronto is going to be shall they lose on their home ice.
Oh, exactly. I'm a little worried for that city in general. You can see how wild they get when they lose or they win. So, hopefully everybody stays safe in Toronto no matter what happens tonight.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I look to see the Panthers try and be physically dominant again, just like you saw at the end of that loss in Game 4. I do think we're the bigger team. I do think we have a lot less to lose, and that's going to really play a big factor into tonight. Our guys really do know how to outbully them, and you can see the Leafs get a little timid with the puck sometimes, and we got to keep playing that way. And I think it'll work out. If the game can continue, low scoring early on, like it did in the last game, I think the Leafs get, more and more scared as the game progresses. I think that goes in our favor. I was thinking about that in the last game. I said, cool, 0-0 after the first. That's fine. I think we need to keep this a low scoring game and put the pressure on them as the game goes on.
Yeah, and timid when you think about how they're breaking out of their own zone as well, especially with the Panthers just quick to get in their face and taking away their time and space as well when it comes to those breakout attempts. But Kevin, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Very great to have you on your debut here on the show, and very happy for you and your co-host as you guys were growing on the Instagram front. And that's of course how I found you and your show, and thankful for you to be hopping on here. But give the listeners an opportunity to plug your stuff and what you do and everything. So go ahead.
Thank you, Armando. No, I'm so glad to be collaborating. It's so cool. I definitely listen to this podcast all the time too. Everything Florida Panthers, totally been obsessed since I've been 3 years old. So, so glad to be here with you. And yeah, if you guys want to come listen to the FLA Cat Nip Podcast, we love talking everything Panthers. We like to put a little humor in there as well. And so, we're just a couple obsessed fans who are living our dreams just in our spare time, trying to talk Florida Panthers and invite as many interesting people on for interviews and all that as we possibly can. And so follow us on our Instagram. It's doing pretty well now. And of course, we're extending over towards Twitter and other platforms as well. So come check us out and of course, indulge in your Florida Panthers.
Awesome, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you next time, my friend.
Thank you so much, Armando. Really great stuff.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steve Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Every dayers, make sure to come back for tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We'll be doing a post-game edition of the show. Hopefully, we are breaking down a Florida Panthers win over the Toronto Maple Leafs on the road and talking about an Eastern Conference appearance. So come back tomorrow for that edition of the show. So I'm Armando Velez with Kevin Rodengen. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.